Hey, welcome back to another episode of Before You Buy, the show where we give you some straight-up gameplay and our first impressions of the latest games releasing. Hi, folks, it's Falcon, and today we're looking at High on Life, the latest game from developer Squanch Games, the guys who made Accounting Plus and Trover Saves the Universe. While those were pretty short indie games that were mainly meant for VR, High on Life is a more ambitious game for the developer. It's a full-price, single-player FPS action game with pretty much everything you'd expect from the genre these days. It's a pretty big step for Squanch, but the question is it any good? Before I get into the game's pros and cons, we gotta talk about the elephant in the room. It is a Justin Roiland game. If that name means anything to you, you should know what to expect. There's a lot of rambling, there's sometimes totally incoherent characters, there's over-the-top violence, vulgar humor, gross out stuff, and a lot of weird looking characters that are kind of half cute and half creepy. If you've seen an episode of Rick and Morty, you pretty much know what you're getting into. Now, to call this guy's brand of humor divisive would be a massive understatement. A lot of people like it, but if characters muttering constantly and talking over each other while saying stupid things is like nails on a chalkboard to you, you're probably going to hate the blast of dialogue that this game throws at you. That's kind of the gimmick of the game. You got talking guns, and you should really just know that if Justin Roiland's brand of humor isn't for you, you're probably not going to be happy because it's a huge part of the game. In fact, I am a fan of Justin Roiland's brand of humor, and I have some criticisms that we'll get into later. But yeah, I think there's probably going to be a lot of people who start this game thinking it's something, realize that it's kind of an extension of Rick and Morty in some ways, and turn it off almost immediately. But if you stick to it, there's a lot to like. The story is as dumb as you'd expect. Earth gets invaded by aliens who want to use humans as drugs. Like, they get high off of however you would classify the way they ingest humans. So you pick up this little blue guy called a Gatlian, and you start blasting. You and your questionable sister escape Earth and team up with a washed-up former bounty hunter, and you start taking on jobs in Blim City, the ultimate goal of taking on the Syndicate and saving Earth. It's basically if the unreleased Prey 2, the not Arcane one that never happened, if you combine that with Oddworld Stranger's Wrath, you probably would have this game, at least accounting for Justin Roiland. So taking on bounties earns you money, which you can use to buy upgrades for your suit and guns. And as the game progresses, you can unlock new movement powers like a dodge, a grappling hook, because every game needs a grappling hook now, and I'm not complaining about that. There's a jetpack too, and a wall run. The constant flow of new enemies adds a lot to the game. It first starts off kind of basic. You're basically just walking around in a place shooting at guys with your little pea shooter. But by the end of the game, you're flying around, swapping guns on the fly, and going absolutely nuts on entire squads of enemies. And it works. You get a lot of movement powers in here, which makes the exploration some of the best parts of the game, actually. Instead of being stuck to linear levels, each planet is kind of a semi-open world, which you can explore and find treasure chests, collectibles, and warp crystals. There's stuff hidden all over the place, and you can easily spend half the game just wandering around looking for chests if you want to. And that's a big positive because these environments are all really dense, detailed, and fun to explore. Like, this is a well-designed game in terms of environment. And part of what makes it fun is how much work they put into, like, even the most incidental details. There's hidden gags and stupid little secrets all over the place. And probably the best optional things are these little warp discs, which you can buy using warp crystals. These can be used to teleport into joke areas, like a tiny city you can smash for your own amusement. Or my own personal favorite, a movie theater where you can literally watch an entire movie commented on by Mike, Rich, and Jay from Red Letter Media. If you're a fan of those guys, this little bonus is practically worth the price of admission on its own, and it's pretty funny, even if the sound mixing could have been a little bit better. Sometimes it was hard to hear the commentary over the movie, but yeah. So the combat isn't quite as strong. There's a lot of stuff to do. Every gun has a primary and secondary fire and a few other tricks in between. You have a pretty effective melee attack. You can deflect projectiles. They put a lot of work into the mechanics of the shooting, but it just doesn't feel that impactful. Like, the shotgun Gus doesn't have a lot of force behind it, and when you've got a shotgun in an FPS, it's supposed to be pretty powerful, and it feels weird that it doesn't feel that way. Even after you upgrade it and the damage goes way up, it never really manages to get the power you really expect from a shotgun. Some of the other weapons are better, but a shotgun is like the easiest weapon to get right, and they didn't, so The enemies do a pretty good job of following you around the battlefield, but overall they're pretty dumb and not the most aggressive. Like basically everything else about the game, it does get better the further in you get, and you start taking on heavies and snipers and little drones that boost enemies. All this stuff happening at once gives you an incentive to use all your abilities, and once you're using abilities, the cool factor of the battle goes up quite a bit. The whole game is about bounty hunting, so every level ends in a boss fight, and to me, these are definitely the highlights. None of them are too difficult on normal difficulty, but they're pretty fun, and they don't go on too long. Again, once we get into the humor aspect of the criticism, I think you'll see why I value that. You also usually get some kind of reward for them, so that's also nice. So graphics, surprisingly impressive in this game. Some of the areas really look fantastic, and they're just filled with details. The character models, surprisingly good. Animations, surprisingly good. It's a little thing, but the way Gene blinks is really cool, and the game is filled with just little things like that. That's actually kind of my favorite part of the game, just wandering around, looking at all this amazingly detailed city stuff, finding little jokes off the beaten path, and taking everything in. Usually the semi-hidden jokes seem to be the best ones, so keep that in mind as you're exploring. The performance is relatively good on Xbox Series X. Frame rate was solid. I didn't really experience any bugs. Some voice lines cut out here and there, and sometimes the collision detection on the platforming was a little wonky when I tried to do things that the game didn't completely want me to do, but no game-breaking bugs or anything. Sound design, very good too. Soundtrack's mostly made up of spacey synth tracks, and they can get a little repetitive, I'm not gonna lie, but they're pretty good overall. And you got some just absolutely fantastic names in terms of the voice cast. Aside from Justin Roiland as the first gun Kenny, JB Smoove is in this game, Tim Robinson, Kevin McDonald from Kids in the Hall. One criticism here, JB Smoove feels a little underutilized. He is so funny. Speaking of funny, let's talk the main thing here. The reason why this game probably exists. The humor. Like, we talked a really large amount about the mechanics and the game stuff because it's all surprisingly good, if I'm completely honest. This is clearly a Justin Roiland vehicle, and the point of it is to have Justin Roiland write a game and do Justin Roiland stuff. So the fact there's actually a pretty damn good game underneath that it's laudable. Now, that being said, for me, the humor is good, but suffers from a key problem. So, people riffing and having fun is great. In fact, some of the funniest lines are just where they left the voice actor laughing and kind of let it feel like an improv session in some ways. But, and I want to stress, this is not to say that the style of humor or even that the humor itself isn't good, because it is. But it suffers a little bit from not being restricted by a time limit like on TV or streaming services. In High on Life, Justin Roiland is not required to edit himself. And that results in a situation where I find myself laughing at something, like it gets me going, and then it keeps going after I've stopped laughing. And there are times that works and gets me laughing again, and then there are times that it doesn't. If we're talking about a TV show that is attempting to get quickly through a narrative, the times where that works, the stuff where they go, I can't not put this in, that's what goes into the shows. In this game, it's just everything. Clearly everything went in. And I really want to stress that that doesn't mean the humor is bad. I actually love this style of humor. But it also definitely made me appreciate the process that Justin Roiland clearly has to go through when making an episode of a TV show, making decisions as to what is really the strongest stuff to keep in. Now, the majority of it does work. I just want to say that. Some of the video game parody stuff is so funny. Like the tutorial helper stuff is so funny, especially when you go into detective mode. Like that whole thing is so, I just could not stop laughing through that sequence. That was a point where it was clear the longer it went on, the better it was. And that made perfect sense as a sequence. I also really enjoyed the parody forums you can find in the menu. Like, it's something like Barkley Shut Up and Jam Gaiden, like that kind of crap, put into a big budget action game. And while I do definitely have the criticism of needing to edit, that doesn't mean that this is just wall-to-wall jokes. There is a little more room to breathe in this game versus Trover Saves the Universe. That's kind of the problem I had with Trover Saves the Universe as well. And I will say it's less of a problem in this game. The guns talk a lot, but it's not nonstop. And if you find them grating or get sick of it, there's an option to turn down the frequency of gun and enemy banter. Now, there are intentionally annoying parts in this game. These guys love to include a character that hovers in front of your face and is really, really annoying. Trover had it too. I think I would deem that more tolerable in this game, and the annoying thing actually did get some laughs out of me. That said, if you don't enjoy the humor and somehow you make it to that point, you're going to shut that game off. You're going to walk away, and you might like punch a mirror or something. I don't know. The humor it's not for everyone. I'm not going to pretend that the humor's for everyone here. I did find a lot of it very funny, but even as a fan of Justin Roiland, my criticisms stand. I think it would have been better with just a little bit more restraint. So, taking the humor out of the equation, it is a relatively complete experience, honestly. It's not bite-sized like the previous games. It takes about 10 hours minimum, and if you're deciding to find every collectible, it's going to take a lot longer. That's a pretty good length for a game of this nature. It doesn't get tedious, it doesn't overstay its welcome, and the times that the humor got to be a little much for me didn't just bring it to a screeching halt. It gets in and gets out, and you don't feel like you're shortchanged. This game really lives and dies on two things: the exploration and the humor. The combat isn't quite as strong. It's not bad. It's a lot better during the boss fights, but I don't really think it can hang with the best of the genre. I don't know if I would call it a problem, but it's definitely the game's weak point. Otherwise, there's a lot to like about High on Life. If you're into the humor, you're probably going to enjoy that element of it. The environmental design is top-notch, and the cast often elevates lines that normally just wouldn't work at all. It is an incredibly weird game, and it's hard not to appreciate it because usually humor games don't bother with solid gameplay, and that's often the biggest problem with this type of game, and that's why I spent so much time on the mechanics. Like, they really work, and I like that. Like, this isn't just a platform for jokes, it's a good game. If you're not crazy about the humor, you might actually be able to have a lot of fun because the game itself is actually very fun to play. You're going to have to turn the frequency of dialogue way down, but I think it's genuinely a very fun game. It does take a little while to get there. You have to get a few more guns and movement abilities before it gets really interesting, but once you do, this is a lot of fun. If you're into games with weird worlds to explore and decent shooting that's not too stressful, I would easily recommend High on Life. If you absolutely hate Justin Roiland, you hate Rick and Morty, there's a huge hurdle to get over here. But if you're indifferent or even like it, even if I would consider the amount of it and the editing of it infrequent, you're gonna get something out of this game. If you're on the fence, there is absolutely no reason not to try this one out on Game Pass. It's free on there, and you'll probably figure out pretty quickly if you can handle it. It might take a little bit longer to get into the good mechanics of the game, but you'll know if you want to pretty quick.
Your ears and clean your ears. It's Drungle Funk Flute time.
Okay, you know what? I'll admit it. This is good. This is good.
But that's what we got out of this game. What do you think? Leave us a comment. Let us know. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications. And as always, thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter @FalconTheHero. And we'll see you next time right here on gameranx. Right here on